I see most people in those developed countries, they have access to financing. Here in Africa or in Uganda, you have to build your house using your money. I don't know where you get it, but that's your problem.
Welcome to this episode of Black No Sugar. Thank you for watching the last episode and giving us comments. If it's your first time here, subscribe to this channel and then give us your thoughts about the different things we'll be discussing here. We're still at our new home, Aleph Book Cafe. Check it out. You can come read here, have amazing coffee and food just here on Kanjucha Street. So today we'll be talking about housing. Decent, affordable housing in Uganda. And we're unable to speak about this topic very properly because we are all amateurs in here. So we brought an expert, Charlie, who'll speak about herself. Yeah, just after. Of course, I'm with Anna. So, Charlie, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Charlie Kongai. Right now, I am here in my capacity as President, Association of Real Estate Agents, Uganda. But I am also a lawyer. Yeah, so I do real estate and legal work.
Okay, thank you. So, we know that according to Uganda's Vision 2040, they promise us by 2030, the government shall be able to offer decent, affordable housing to all Ugandans, yeah, and also upgrade the slums. We know that slums are a legit problem in this country, and we currently have about a deficit of 1.6 million or so.
2 million.
2 million now? Over 2 million of housing deficits in this country. And as we're reflecting on this topic, I remember just telling the producer that I'm interested in this particular conversation, maybe because I haven't paid rent yet. And I feel personally attacked. But I know that today's conversation just goes beyond just affordability of rent. What's the quality of the houses that most Ugandans have access to? Are they affordable? What's affordable for Kemidja may not be affordable for Anna. How is the government going to be able to achieve Vision 2040 by 2030, which is just really 10 years from now? So we brought an expert just to help us understand this subject better. So Charlie, in your position as a housing expert, what are the current housing problems, or what's the situation looking like? What problems are we looking at? How bad is it?
I think the worst part is that the sector is unregulated. That is the worst. Everyone is doing what they want. I just wake up and say, here in Kanjucha, I need to put a bar. Or I'll put a school or a residential or a petrol station or whatever. That is the first problem.
Yeah.
The second issue, there's too much land conflict. So as you're buying your property to build maybe a house, you have to compensate this, that. You have to, basically the cost goes, the broker and everything goes so high. Then the broker always wants to put a markup. Someone tells you, sell me this house at 50 million, then the broker will put it at 70 because the seller has said whatever you make on top of that is what you will take. So the broker will do his best to make it as expensive as possible. And what happens? Housing becomes unaffordable. Because property which you should have bought at 50 million, you will buy at 70, 80. And then go to taxes and the cost of materials and all that, it becomes expensive and it becomes unaffordable. But we need regulation around that. And then there's also no, okay, now they have developed building codes. I think it's there, but is it enforced?
What's a building code?
Like there are standards
on
how you should, a house should be.
A residential house should have these.
Yeah, this is minimum size.
That's important. Ugandan builders these days, the bathroom is right above the shower, then where the sink is. So work around that little space to do whatever you have to do.
Is there anyone who supervises that? No one. That's why we are saying real estate sector is ignored. Everyone is doing whatever they want, however they want, which is so sad.
Yeah. And of course that's a problem because the people with more money will put up better houses and those with money will be able to afford the housing. And maybe just, I know that Anna has interest in this kind of thing because she's just gotten into making sure she gets, maybe builds her own house and then, you know, puts all these things. And she was talking about how capitalistic most of our buildings are and their construction. What do you think has been the major problem for especially vulnerable communities? We are looking at low-income earners. We know that an average Ugandan earns like between 100 and 150, right? That's in Kampala. How will a person like that, what's been their experience, especially when you look at the nature of housing that we have in Kampala, or just really in urban areas, affordability, accessibility, also putting in consideration the fact that most of these people do not have collateral that they'll borrow from one of these banks and be able to pay back because their jobs may not allow them that. What's been the experience for most of these vulnerable people? We're looking at people living in slums, people in the informal sector, queer people who leave home a little earlier than the rest. What's been their experience like?
So rent is highly expensive, especially rent around the services that matter or essential services that matter. You'll find that in order to access a hospital, if you were, if your child fell sick, you are better off in Kampala or in the urban areas somewhere where you can access a hospital. You're better off next to a school, otherwise it becomes very expensive or almost impossible to access services because they're not evenly distributed in the country. They are in remote areas. These areas are neglected, so they encourage this rush into certain places, and that creates a housing crisis. And then the other thing that is hard, Shirley mentioned it, the lack of regulation, the lack of transparency in acquiring things like land and even buying a house. Makes it hard for a lot of people. It becomes a risky venture to just buy land in Uganda. Like buy land when you know, if someone says you bought air, in quotes, you know, like your land belongs to someone else, you're not going to faint because it's really a risky venture. So a lot of people, even when you have like money like for land that you can buy, you'll spend a lot of time thinking about how to navigate this very difficult system of acquiring property, land or a house. And it takes longer and longer to acquire property. Like you want to buy more expensive property probably because you think, this looks like it's more, it's more legit, like Ugandans, like we say, it's more legit. So there are all those complications. And a lot of people also experience loss when they buy this land and it ends up being land that is either unregistered or it belongs to someone else. The whole middle broker system is quite a complex thing.
Of course, I'm concerned because I am a young person that is interested in one of these days owning a house, right? But like we have agreed in the beginning, there's already a housing crisis because of affordability, access to money for you to build a house. And Shirley, you spoke about the kind of work that you do. We know that a lot of agents of housing or agencies are building for the rich, or at least from where I'm seated, that's what it looks like. So if you have 200 million, even the billboards that I keep seeing, National Housing Corporation, selling houses, 200 million, a one-bedroom house, you know. Wherever in Nigeria, this is how much you're going to need. It's too expensive that if I am to save, I'm going to save for the rest of my life. But even if I'm going to access a loan to be able to pay, I may not have the collateral that I need. So what does decent and affordable housing look like, Shirley, here, especially in urban centers where most of us, the urban poor, live?
Well, a decent house in Uganda, I think has not yet been defined.
Yeah.
But it's just a house that has the basic amenities that you need in a house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Toilet, bathroom, kitchen, living room. Yeah. Good sewerage, good water connection, good electricity, good access, nearness to all those social places that you need to go. I think that would be like a normal decent house. Yeah.
I don't know what you think.
The idea of owning my own home has been on my mind like since forever, almost since childhood, because I have experienced what a lot of Ugandans experience, whereby probably you are one salary away from being homeless. Like things could happen and you find yourself either you're going to have to stay with relatives or even be totally homeless. So I've invested quite a bit of time ever since I got access to internet in trying to see how I can have my own home, despite all these other things, especially with cost, because it's really costly to build a home. Like, you do not know how costly it is until you start doing it. It looks like you're throwing money in a hole. It doesn't. You need a constant supply of money, which is either probably in loans or you have to be earning highly. And that's just like, I mean, we've established that most of us are like lower middle class or upper lower class, and so we do not have these amounts of money. But in my research on what other countries are doing, I've seen what they call, sustainable housing, this idea of sustainable housing. And I was both relieved and surprised to see housing that is that is like the traditional kind of housing being built elsewhere in countries that we believe are first world. Like in New Zealand, I saw that this woman had built what you would call here a mud and water house. But she did her research so well, together with like some people who are helping her build it, that when she brought a construction board of New Zealand that regulates housing and its standards to test its integrity, they affirmed its integrity and they said, okay, this works. It is healthy. It will hold up well. It will not compromise your health. And a lot of people, so these people who are building these kinds of housing from different things like, let me say, recycled plastic, have made a kind of community where they are improving their craft, going back to traditional housing, which was simpler and I think less costly, and which it takes away. It puts back power into the hands of the poor. For instance, a lot of Ugandans have land, right? But most of us now can no longer think about going back to our maybe parents or grandparents' land and building a mud water house, because we see it as something that is backward. And yet, the purpose of, I think, our education system is not to necessarily take us away from everything that the classical kind of way, but to improve it. And I found out that the oldest house in the world is like 10,000 years old, and it has survived, and it's a mud and water hut, and it has survived earthquakes and all these kind of catastrophes. So they hold well together. So to come back to the point, what decent housing for me looks like is, first of all, of course, housing that has the basic amenities that a house should have, maybe a toilet or a latrine, whichever one chooses, a sleeping area and a cooking area and good ventilation. But most importantly, something that is affordable in the sense that you do not have to export things to build a house, because that makes it more expensive. Like, can we investigate floors that are done with like cow dung as it used to be? Can our people in the construction industry, can students do projects, and can they be regulated so that people can now start building houses themselves without having to get so much of it externally, because that is what makes it expensive. Yes.
Yeah, I know also that when I was having a conversation with Anna just earlier on, we spoke about containers and how many people in other countries have tried to just, what is it called, remake them into homes, put windows and doors, and that will be, I know, 10 times or so less money that you'll spend.
I think we haven't embraced that yet, because I have seen developers who are trying to bring them, we call them prefabs, prefurbished,
Refurbished, yeah.
But if you try to interest a Ugandan to do that, they will tell you, I need to see one. Is there one which I need to see? But still, they will not accept it because they think it is foreign. For us in Uganda, this is how we build.
Bricks,
I have also
cement.
tried to look at the option of doing a mud and water. Personally, I have been interested in doing that for myself, not necessarily for commercial purposes, but for myself. I have always liked that idea and I've wanted to do. But whichever architect you go to, they'll discourage you and say, this, first of all, the grass is not there, I don't know what, they'll have issues and they'll discourage you from doing that. But if you see foreigners who come and develop those things, I saw one in Gulu.
Yeah.
It's so nice. Yeah?
The grass is beautiful.
The grass is beautiful. The interior was nicely done, but very African in modern water, with all these usual amenities, bathtub, and you enter there and you're like, wow, where have I been? So I think it's also mindset and technology for our developers who are constructing. Like, we need to be open and try to. I was telling someone that we actually have wooden houses in Makerere. And they've been there.
Wooden, I think, on the
there are some wooden residential houses there, which have been there since I left university in 2000. But by the time I entered, my parents were there and that house was there. And it's surviving. But we still can't change our mindset and say we can actually do this. We still want to import and use the usual,
which are extremely expensive, and which, of course, at the end of the day makes the final product even more expensive.
But let's not also forget that that is just a small part of the things that make the cost of housing very expensive. There's construction material, yes, but I think that is even very minimal.
What would be the bigger problem?
The bigger problem is the cost of land. Guys, do you see how abnormal cost of land is? Here in Kampala, someone just comes and shamelessly tells you $1 million and you're like, are you joking? The cost of land is very high. And if you combine with the issue of compensating squatters and all that, it's very high. I see most people in those developed countries, they have access to financing. Here in Africa or in Uganda, you have to build your house using your money. I don't know where you get it, but that's your problem. You need to get a house using your own.
That's why we have many thieves.
We don't have access to finance. Me and you, who are self-employed, we can't access financing. We can't access. You have to be a public servant. You have to work in some recognized NGO. You must have land or get your pension for you to access finance. Yet the majority of us are in formal business. Informal business.
And I
so
agree.
If we can't access finance, if the cost of land, because to build a house, say here, or let me go to Nigeria where everyone is, 100 million plus, a 50 by 100. Now, if you put that, and then after that, you have to now look for construction material. And then the other issue is the developer who has to build that house comes and finds land, there's no infrastructure. There's no water, there's no power, there's no road. So that developer has to make a road, has to bring water, has to bring power. And all that cost is what? Included into the house. So you will have the cost of financing. First of all, it's very high for the developers to borrow from our banks. It's 20 up to 25%. Other countries are 4%, 3. Here we are talking 25. So you have that cost of 25%. Then you have to pull all that infrastructure. Then the cost of land is high. Then the broker has to be paid. Then the taxes are high and numerous.
Then your neighbor does not want you to have a road that sort of just interferes with their small. I know it's a combination of many issues.
So many things.
And the access to social services, like Anna said, we all want to be closer to the urban centers where I know that in the middle of the night, if I'm feeling unwell, I'll quickly dash in and find a clinic. Which nice, decent hospital do you find, say, in Nigeria, where the population is so huge? It's not that you have to drive all the way to town to look for school, to look for, it's terrible. So all that combined together makes it so unaffordable. Okay. What do you think Uganda, especially young people, can do to access better housing or even more affordable housing? I know that we spoke about the fact that it's really expensive to own land, which is extremely true. That even the people that have land, like you spoke about earlier, Shadi, land has a lot of wrangles, so you're never sure. So by the time maybe as sisters we decide that this inheritance, we're going to divide it into 4 pieces and each one of us takes, there's a singer who wants, there's an uncle who is refusing, all of you cannot build there. So I know that there are instances where there is land that has nothing that's happening, but simply because it has a lot of wrangle still ongoing on it. So no one is selling it, no one is buying it, but you're in Kampala struggling to pay 700,000 per month of rent to survive, right? Yet you have land elsewhere that you could use. But like Anna said, you're not going to live here and go to Kasese and build
No,
simply
you have
because
to
you
be
have
here.
land. Maybe you have a job that is in Kampala. So you moving to build in Kasese means that you're going to have to move your children's school, you're going to have to change jobs, which is a bit difficult. So what can Ugandans, especially those in the informal sector, women who are mostly women, young people that are currently mostly taking up, I know, like 70% of the rent.
I think
houses. What can we do to make it more accessible?
It starts with...
sorry, Charlie. Sorry. What can the government do? Because I know the government plays a role in ensuring, because it's a basic right? How do we hold government accountable for what it's supposed to do to make housing more affordable?
Government has to take interest. Actually, government is... The first place is government. Yeah. Government has to place more interest in housing. Just the way they pushed for education and good health and what. Like, housing should be one of the major sectors. Let me say top 3 sectors that government should take interest in. And government should make sure it's intentional to provide housing to Ugandans. One, you see how government can give guarantees to investors who come here. They even provide them with land. An investor comes is given land in Shimoni or Naguru or wherever to do whatever development they do. They are given tax holidays and they are given government guarantees. Why can't we do that for housing and be intentional to make sure that housing goes down? There are so many people who come to me actually from out, and they want to invest in Uganda, but they can't get all those incentives that are given to other sectors. We need those incentives. So many people want to bring affordable housing here. Well, affordable housing, we mean, in this case, we are saying low-cost housing. So many people want to do that, but we need government to take interest and give us the guarantees and give us the land and be intentional to provide a housing fund. Why is housing finance in commercial, doing like business like any other bank? This should be a specific for housing and land for housing, and be intentional to include everyone, even the informal sector somehow. And then government should not leave housing to the private sector alone. Government should get involved in housing. They should provide this low-cost housing for, you know, for these low earners. And it would improve. And then direct development. Government should be intentional to direct development and also to direct the cost. So if government is intentional to make sure all the brokers are licensed, all the brokers, like the way they charge is regulated, like the way we lawyers are. We charge according to some law. You don't just wake up and say, this is the amount you should pay me. So government should be intentional to direct even that. And that will be able to push the costs down, among other things.
We don't have many policies around to sort of support the work that maybe private sector, real estate, you know, are doing towards more affordable housing? Do we have any regulation, guidelines, policies around that? Because
for housing, there's not. Can you imagine housing is just a department in the Ministry of Lands? It's just a department in the Ministry of Lands. Yet housing affects everyone. How can that be? Housing should be like a major, like authority or ministry or something that looks over and makes sure everything. But it's ignored.
Anyway.
I also think that there should be interest in innovation around housing. And the government should incentivize people who are doing innovation around there. I think after working at an innovation center that I understood actually what education is supposed to do, because I see what it's supposed to do here, it's being done elsewhere in first world countries where students who are coming out of engineering school or construction school are the ones actually at the forefront of things like affordable and sustainable housing. They are thinking of things like plastic lumber. They are thinking of mud and water housing and how to improve it. They are spearheading these things, and we have a ministry of innovation. And housing, I think, is a basic human right. Like,
it is.
if they have made water something of like a basic service that people should get at low cost, goodness, a roof over your head and a floor under your feet should be one of them. So I think the education system should take innovation seriously and reward it so that we can have a solution to this, because there are solutions, but because no one really supports it, and housing is already expensive. No one wants to risk, like the individuals are not going to risk on plastic lumber. They're like, you know what, let me just steal or do whatever I need to do to get a brick and mortar house other than risk this mud and water thing. But if the ministry or scientists or professionals are putting their voices towards something, or either affirming it or improving it, then people are going to follow. And of course, there are the distribution of like services. People keep saying, especially older people, why are you going to the city? Why do you want to buy land in like Nigeria or Kampala? Why don't you go and buy in your village? If I'm giving birth, if like I get struck by labor pains, I don't want to be part of a statistic that died on its way in a wheelbarrow to the maternity ward, you know? So it's really, I think even people can't do much about it. This is like an institutional thing that needs to be sorted out first there, and then we can come in and do something.
Of course, from what both of you say, I think there's not a lot of protection for people that are homeless. Yet we know that we have such a huge number of children connected to the streets because they have nowhere to stay, right? So share your opinions with us. Have you paid rent, first of all? Are you suffering like the rest of us? So just tell us what you think about the housing problem in Uganda, or if we actually have a problem and what can we do to improve housing. We are at a Left Cafe, so if you got a bit of feedback, we are trying to make the perfect coffee for their customers. Check it out and then subscribe and leave us your opinions down there. Thank you. Bye.